Hello and welcome back to the channel. Now we're a couple of months into the new golf season and I thought now was the perfect time to jump in and take a closer look at my ShotScope performance data to get a better idea of how well I've actually been performing this season. To me, it has felt like I've played some pretty good golf and my scoring has been a lot more consistent than in previous years. But it's really useful to actually have access to this data to see what is working well and perhaps where I need to focus my efforts to try and improve my golf game and hopefully reduce my handicap. Now I use the ShotScope V5 GPS and shot tracking golf watch. I've got plenty of videos, tutorials and whatnot on this YouTube channel and on my golf blog. So if you want to learn more about the V5, then you can check out those videos. And if any ShotScope products are of interest to you, then I'll put my affiliate link in the description below, and there's also a handy 15% discount code, which is Andy's Golf, and that can be used across all products in the ShotScope range. But in this video, what I want to do is I want to delve into my performance statistics just to give you a closer look at the dashboard, what kind of data is available, and see if we can pinpoint any areas where perhaps I could do a little bit better. The data is available via a mobile app as well as an online dashboard, but I'm going to use the online dashboard here because I think it's just a little bit more useful and presents the information in a nicer way for this video. So let's jump into the dashboard. Now on the homepage you can see a little bit of information about your last round and where you're maybe gaining or losing strokes. So I can see here my last round and I can see it against my previous 10. So at a quick glance in terms of tee shots, I lost 1.3 during my last round compared to 2.3 strokes on my previous 10. If we jump across here to the general scoring, my last round I lost 8, but actually across the previous 10 I only lost 6.85 strokes. So in general, I have been a little bit better off a tee during yesterday's round compared to the last 10, but actually on average lost a few more strokes. We can see there with putting, my putting really struggled in the last round, so I lost 3.8 strokes compared to 0.9, but my short game was slightly better than those previous 10. So we get a quick glance here at strokes gained for the last round against the last 10. What I'm really interested in though is if I jump into performance, this is where I can see all of my performance statistics and we can start comparing my performance to different handicap groups through benchmarking. So you'll see here we are in favourites. Now you can customise the favourites here to show different facets, but what I'm interested in is just leaving the defaults on here. And I'm going to compare against a 0 handicap. Now you'll see you can benchmark against a tour player, 0 through to 25 handicap. As a 7 handicap, I like to focus on scratch. Really, I probably should maybe compare against a 5, which is the closest group to the better player, if you like, but I'll go with scratch because that's where I want to get to. So we can see here, score to par for the year of 2025. I have averaged 9.2 over par. We can jump down and we can look at specific rounds. So in April here, I had 2 +6 rounds. Then we jumped up slightly into May with +9. Then we had a +13 at Kilspindie where it was very wet and windy. And then we had a couple of other rounds here at my home course where again it's been quite a bit wild. So the rounds score has been creeping up. I can see here that I am 7.2 strokes on average above a 0 handicapper, so we need to try and obviously bring that down. But if we compare that with 5, I'm actually only 1.2 strokes off of a 5 handicap. So we can see here, I am trending along here and we're just a little bit below where we kind of want to be. So for a 5 handicap, probably want to be around about 8 strokes above par. And this is interesting because a lot of people look at their handicap as being something they need to play to every single round, but actually this data is showing us that in general, even a 5 handicapper doesn't tend to play to 5 on average. Let's jump back to a 0 handicap scratch golfer and let's look at tee to green. So I am losing 5.68 strokes from tee to green. And this obviously, this big one here, 0.64 compared to this one. So I had a really good round here, where I didn't lose many tee to green, but then we can see those rounds, that 13 over, 11 and 10, have, you know, brought this average down a little bit. So tee to green losing almost 6 strokes. Tee shot accuracy, so I am 42% off of the tee, which is actually not too bad. Now I'm 8% below that of a scratch golfer. So again, 50% is the target or the average for a scratch. But if we jump in and look at a 5, I'm actually 9% down. So you'll see there that a 5 handicapper has got a slightly better average for hitting fairways than a scratch golfer. So my last round, 69%, so a lot higher. I was quite good here back in April, and then there's been a little bit of a drop. Those rounds where we had a lot of wind, I wouldn't be expecting to hit many fairways. In fact, 14% and 23% is pretty poor. Green success rate for me is somewhere that I always struggle. 34% this year is generally really poor. Much below that scratch line. And again, if we change this to a 5 handicapper, we're getting a bit closer there. So 3% off of a 5 handicap. 5 handicap at 34% for greens in regulation is probably a lot less than most people think. I think most amateurs would be looking to hit at least 50%, 55, 60% of the greens. But when you look at this data, you can see even at 34%, I'm not actually that far off of a 5 handicapper. But for me, if I want to get into that scratch group, I need to be making up a lot of ground. So this is certainly an area where I think an improvement needs to be made. Up and down. So I generally scramble quite well. Of course, conditions have not been great for the last month. So you'll see here, I was scrambling in these rounds at 75, 70, 64%, well above that of a scratch golfer. But in those rounds where the wind has picked up and I've not been probably leaving myself in the best positions around the greens, I have struggled a little bit and I've been quite far below my average for scrambling. So scrambling is maybe something that we'll put down to the conditions here and not really how I generally perform. One area that I do struggle with is certainly putting. So I am losing 1.878 strokes on putting. I actually was gaining around about here, but again, when I've gone and played either courses I'm not too familiar with recently or in the tough conditions, I've probably found that I'm not gaining strokes because I'm not even getting it close enough to the pin. What we can do now is we can actually jump in and look at these compared to last year. So, score to par this year, 9.2. Score to par average last year, 10.3. So I'm almost a stroke better this year than I was last year. Tee to green last year losing 5.28. This year losing 5.68. So obviously last year I played more rounds because it's taken all of the rounds across the entire year, but we're only just 6 months into this, and actually my first round is only from April. So we've got less data to work with here, but we can see that I am not so great tee to green. Tee shot accuracy, so 42% this year, last year 47%, so there's been a slight drop there, and actually across the whole of last year was only 3% down on that scratch golf average. But if we look at green success, last year 34%, this year 34%, so very consistent in terms of greens hit, but I'll definitely be wanting to get that number up. And then if we look at my average for scrambling, last year it averaged 45%, this year we're currently sitting at 44%. So we're pretty close in terms of the stats compared to last year, but where I think I'm probably losing some is around putting. So last year under a stroke lost, this year closer to almost getting towards 2 strokes. So I think we need to work on a little bit of putting, but the encouraging thing here is actually my score to par is better so far this year by almost a stroke than it was last year. Let's now jump into having a look at some other data. So you can look at your club performance. I genuinely don't really worry about this because over time I've learned how far I hit my clubs. I am working on my swing just now through online, through coaching should I say, and I suspect that my performance average and whatnot is going to change. But for anyone who is new to golf or new to ShotScope products, I think being able to track your performance average data for your clubs is very, very useful. But we know that we want to work on my approach play. So let's jump into approaches here, and we can start really looking at the data and see where we're making most mistakes. So for 2025 compared to an 8 handicapper, we know that we're losing 18% here. I am actually pretty consistent in terms of missing left and right. So you'll see here 11% either side this year. If we jump back to last year, we were missing more to the more short than we were left. If we come back in this year, I'm not leaving as many short. I'm finding 34% of the green, and we've got 8% going long. So my miss is really short, to be honest. And we can see here on this little diagram, we can see how many are making the green, and we've got a lot of them that are coming up short. So what this is telling me is that I could really be doing with taking an extra club with my approach play, because more often than not, I'm not going long, I'm leaving those short. We can change this here to say, well, from 150 yards and in, I'm actually hitting 48% of the greens, and I'm only leaving 19% short. So I suspect that my biggest issue is probably going to be between 125 and 175 yards, or maybe even up to 200 yards, where we're 30% from that distance. But if we put this down to 150 to 200, 29%, again, lots of them are coming up short. So we can change the data here, and I could see that if I'm looking at 100 yards and in, I'm actually 68%. So I'm hitting quite a lot of greens from this distance. But anything above, probably above 125, I think, is where we are experiencing issues and leaving lots of them short. We can also then look at over time, so I can see how my approach play has changed. So this first round of the year, 71%, really good. I am hovering around this kind of trending line. We've been above it slightly. The last one was bang on at 42%. We can look at clubs. So we can see, okay, what clubs am I using for my approach play? So I use my sand wedge quite often. That's probably because I am maybe driving quite well and getting close enough to the greens to use that. But when we start looking at things like the 7 iron, I've used for 6 shots, 17%. But interestingly, 15 shots with my 6 iron, and I've managed to hit 40% of the greens. So I could maybe do a little bit of work here with the 7 and 8 iron, which I would be expecting to hit more greens with, but seem to be struggling. And then we can look at distance and lie, so we can see from the fairway what percentage I'm actually hitting the green. So anytime I am from 50 to 100 yards, pretty good off the fairway, and actually 68% is pretty good overall. But when we get to this 100 to 150, that fairway percentage, 18% of my shots from the fairway are making the green from 100 to 150 yards. I'm actually better at hitting the green from the rough, almost twice as good compared to the fairway. And then when we get to 150 to 200 yards, I'm really starting to struggle. From the rough there, I'm not hitting many greens at all. 25% overall isn't good enough. So we know from looking at this data that the approach play needs to be better. And we can see here in terms of proximity to the hole, 54% with my approach play isn't great. 60 foot, 36% of the time, I'm really not getting it tight enough. So 12% of my shots are giving me that really good chance to actually make a birdie. And most of the time, if I'm hitting greens, I'm going to be putting from quite a long distance. And therefore, we can see shots to finish. So with the different clubs, I can actually see on average how many shots it takes me to finish when I'm playing an approach shot with a pitching wedge, for example, right the way through to my 3 wood. Let's now jump into putting, because I think this is definitely an area where we can look to improve. So last year, we averaged 29.6 putts. I haven't done anything different with my putting, but this year, I've averaged 31.8. So I haven't been practicing my putting, but I suspect that that putting number is higher either because my approach play hasn't been quite as good, or because putting is just something that I seem to neglect. So we can see putts per green. You can see how many times we 1 putt, 2 putt and 3 putt. So last year, we 3 putted 4% of the time with 2 putts at 59. This year, same 2 putts, but we're almost twice as many 3 putts. So we're not putting as well, and potentially if I'm further away, it's resulting in more 3 putts. Putts per green in regulation, 2 putts this year versus 1.9 last year. So Not a massive difference when I'm hitting the greens, but you can see distance of putts made 61 foot this year compared to 54 foot last year. So made more putts in terms of distance this year than last year. But the first putt distance this year, 18 foot. First putt last year, 15 foot. So I'm a little bit closer last year with those approaches, and this year I am a little bit further away on average, and therefore that could be what is causing me to make more putts per round. We can even jump in and see our misses short and long. So this year I've missed 53% of my putts long, compared to last year where it was 51% were actually missed short. So it could be right now that I'm actually being a little bit too aggressive with that first putt, and that is leading to more 3 putts. And then we can jump into make percentage. So if you look at this year, I've made 99% of my 0 to 3 foot, 3 to 6 foot, 56%. When we get to that 6 to 9 feet range, we are at 25%, which is a quarter of putts. And if we benchmark here, we can see we're well below the average here. If we jump to last year, I was making more putts within 6 to 9 feet. I was making more putts within 3 to 6, slightly less 0 to 3, but this is where I suspect I am causing myself some issues. So I probably need to go away and work on the lag putting, but also work on putts from 3 to 9 feet. Now you can also compare your putters, but I only have one putter, so I can't compare that. And let's lastly finish up with my scoring. So we'll jump back to this year and we can see a breakdown here, but we can start to look at my score for the front nine, the back nine. Now, if we look at 2024, it's pretty much the same. The front and back nine were actually very, very close. Whereas if we look at this year, I am scoring higher on the front nine and a little bit better on the back nine. So 3.7 average back, 5.4. Now, of course, if I'm playing different courses, this is going to change. But what is useful to look at is my score for par 3s, 4s and 5. So par 3s averaging 3.6 compared to last year where it was 3.4. So par 3s not playing them as well this year. Par 4s, 4.6 this year, 4.6 last year. But where I am making a little bit of an inroad is my par 5s. So I'm playing the par 5s better this year compared to last year by 0.2. And then finally, let's just finish with the score breakdown. This is one area that I definitely have noticed a bit of an issue. So last year, I made 39% bogeys, 8% double and 6% birdies. If I look at this year though, I've increased the birdie count slightly, and I've also reduced the double bogeys. And those are the two areas where I think I am making better scores. So I've consciously tried to focus on making less double bogeys, keeping the ball in play, not playing that dangerous shot where I might lose a ball, and that's resulted in so far less bogeys. The birdie count is relatively similar in terms of a percentage, so 6 or 7%, there's not much difference. But you'll see last year I actually made more pars as a percentage than this year and made less bogeys. So I've dropped the double bogey number down, but this year I'm slightly higher in bogeys as a percentage and slightly lower in pars. So for me, if I'm looking at this data, obviously I'm just doing a quick flyover in this video, but you see there's a wealth of information here, and I think jumping in and looking at the strokes gained, trying to work out where I am gaining or losing gives me a really good opportunity to improve. So we can see clear as day against a scratch golfer this year, I am losing far, far too many approach shots. So the approach play and hitting those greens needs to be tightened up. We can also see that putting is a bit of an issue and my tee shot. So I'm confident with my short game, but I think if I can find more fairways and more greens, then hopefully that putting stat will improve because I'll probably not be putting from the edge of the green or quite so far away. But this approach play definitely needs to improve. So there we go, that's a dive into the shot scope data for the season so far. We are early in the season, so I don't have a huge amount of data to work from. I've only played probably 8 or 9 rounds, and compared to 2024 there was a lot more data. But it's given me a starting point, it's given me a focus. I certainly need to get down and probably work at the range from that 150 to 200 yards, trying to hit more greens, trying to hit more targets. And I'm going to revisit this video in a few months' time and trying to look at what has improved. So if I put the work in with the coach, if I put the work in the range, will I be able to bring this approach number down and hopefully lower those scores even further? But there are positives to take away. We've dropped by almost a stroke on average this year, and that really is the main thing. If you're reducing your score, you are likely playing better golf. But thanks very much for watching. If you have any questions or comments or observations, drop them in the comments area below. If you're new to the channel and haven't done so already, please do consider subscribing. And if you enjoyed this video, make sure you hit that like button. But I'll see you in the next video.